Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here online. I am Pastor Josh Pontius, coming to you from Community of Grace Lutheran Church right here in Peoria, Arizona. And this week we are celebrating and commemorating Palm Sunday right here in 2025, and we are excited to have you along for this journey. Now, a few years ago, I had a bit of a dilemma on my hands because it was, in fact, Palm Sunday. And I was in seminary, but I wasn't assigned to a church that I was supposed to work at or I had to worship at. And so I kind of had the pick of the litter. I could go wherever it was that I'd wanted to. And I'd gotten used to exploring all sorts of different traditions and faith traditions and expressions of different denominations throughout the Philadelphia area where I was going to school. And so, yeah, I went to plenty of Lutheran churches, but I also checked out Episcopalian church and a non-denominational multi-site megachurch, and even an all-black Baptist church where it was very easy to tell that I was one of the visitors there. Lots of wonderful expressions of faith and the ways that they're lived out. But being Palm Sunday and hoping to learn a little bit more about how different churches lived out that expression, I had decided that I was going to try to find a Lutheran church to go and worship on Palm Sunday. And so I had all sorts of expectations and hopes for what that would look like. So I visited a church that I had gone to a few times before. I'd always had a pretty positive experience at. I knew the pastor pretty well, and I said, this is going to be the place that I went. Now, Grayson and Rebecca chose to stay home. Daxton wasn't born yet, so I was on my own for the 20-minute or so drive to this church. And what happened next, when I arrived and when the worship service started, I gotta say, I was frustrated and I was disappointed. Now, they started the service as many Lutheran churches and others do. They actually handed out palm branches to everybody. And so when the service started, everybody's waving their palm branches. And just like we actually do here in person, they had the little kids process around, kind of march around the worshiping space, waving their palms to songs of Hosanna. And so that was in the first 5 minutes of the worship experience. And it was right then that Palm Sunday actually ended. And they started by reading this scripture from Palm Sunday, but that was going to be it. It said that many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." But that was it. That was the end of Palm Sunday. We were 5 minutes into the service, and as I kind of feared from reading along in the bulletin that they handed out, it was also going to be Palm and Passion Sunday. The rest of the readings and the sermon and the rest of the service were going to be focused on the events between Palm Sunday and on Easter. We were going to get some stuff from Maundy Thursday, like where they celebrate communion, that last night Jesus was on earth. And then also we were going to go through Good Friday, even though it was Sunday. It was kind of built this way so that the folks who couldn't come to their midweek services during what we call Holy Week, so that they could still experience the whole story, that whole story of that journey from Palm Sunday through Easter. And I was so frustrated. The entire sermon, the entire message from this pastor that I liked and admired was all about the Good Friday stuff. You know, with all of those cheerful, uplifting, life-giving things of that story of Jesus' crucifixion, his painful death on the cross. It was tough. I was devastated. I wasn't there for the Good Friday stuff. I had every plan to go to a Good Friday service later that week. Hey, shout out to all of you. Just so you know, we do offer an online Good Friday service as well as one here in person this Friday at 6:30. Hope to see you here. But that's not the point. I had so many hopes for Palm Sunday. I wanted it. In some ways, I kind of needed it. In my frustration, in my anger, I even, for the first time that I can remember, left a worship service early. I went up for communion, and I got my communion elements, and then rather than walking back to my seat, I walked straight for the door, walked out to the parking lot, got in my car, and drove home. Never looked back. Now, I did a lot of preparation for this week's message in a hotel room in Rwanda in Africa, and we'll talk about more in the coming week, so I apologize if I'm kind of all over the place, but there was something about this message, about Palm Sunday, and this story that came to mind as I was there, this idea of expectations. What I was expecting to see, what I thought I needed to see, what I thought I should see, what I should experience. And I realized that this adventure of Palm Sunday, a little bit of my trip to Rwanda, some of those expectations got in the way of my ability to see what actually was happening, what actually was good and life-giving in that moment, even if it wasn't in the ways that I expected. And the story of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday would have been the same for those people who had gathered there. They would have had expectations, and I don't know if Jesus met them. In the Gospels, we hear that Jesus is preparing to enter Jerusalem, and he sends two of his disciples on ahead of him to kind of prepare the way and to get him a ride, to find an unridden young donkey. And this incredible story that he's going to ride into town, and it's not going to be this calm, kind of gentle ride on his way to the temple there in Jerusalem. You see, the popularity of Jesus had been growing and growing over the course of his ministry, and the people of this Roman-oppressed territory and province were anxiously awaiting deliverance, of saving from this oppression and fear that they had been living under from empire after empire after empire. And in their longing, in their hope, in their excitement about this person of Jesus, they saw the possibility of their deliverance. They saw and had an expectation of what it looks like. They had in their hope what they thought it should look like, what it should sound like, what should happen next. And a lot of these people, they expected a political and maybe military leader to kind of rally the people, to kind of rally the troops, to encourage the people to rise up and be independent and free as they believed that they were destined to be. But instead of a general riding in on a massive war horse, they found a humble servant riding a young donkey who was just so dead set on giving his life for a people that didn't even fully understand the gift that he was about to give to them and to all people. And a lot of them, they had an expectation that he was going to come to increase their power and their prestige and their status as God's people, to make them strong in the face of their oppressors, and just kind of ignoring and neglecting all of the things that Jesus had been saying about remaining humble, about setting aside their own desires, and about taking up their own crosses to follow him. They expected someone who'd teach them to be strong, who would stand, how they could stand up for themselves, and in doing so, take back this land that was rightfully theirs. How easily they forgot or disregarded his commands to turn the other cheek, to offer up their own right and our own right to retaliation in the face of harms and injustices in exchange for this radical peace that Jesus was offering. They expected someone that would increase their wealth, to show them there's ways of prosperity that would then make them like a new economic force in their region, both as nations and as individuals, to kind of prioritize the material comforts that were so often understood to be signs of God's grace and God's favor. And instead, Jesus constantly told them to sell their possessions and forsake the love of money and to use the resources that they actually had in service towards the less fortunate. And when Jesus didn't meet the expectations of the crowd, they end up turning on him. I don't want to spoil what's happening over the next week, but the same crowds that on Palm Sunday are shouting, "Hosanna, God, deliver us, God save us, these people with all of these hope and expectations, those same crowds are going to be the ones who in just a few short days are going to cry out, crucify him. Send him away. He's not the right one. I wish I could say that we as Christians have learned our lessons from this crowd, because we still have expectations of Christ and of his church. And when they don't meet our expectations, when things don't sound the way we expect them to, when they don't look the way they expect them to, we are quick to judge and maybe even reject the message of God and the message of Jesus. So often we try to make Jesus fit our vision and our expectation, and we expect the scriptures to meet our vision and our expectation of what they are. We want Jesus to look like us. We want Jesus to think like us. We want Jesus to act like us and behave like us and maybe even vote like us. And we can be so sure that our vision and expectation of Jesus is not just the right one, but should be the universal one. And sometimes Jesus shows up in places like the scriptures with something that doesn't fit our understanding, that doesn't fit our expectations, that doesn't fit our priorities. We're quick to dismiss it. Maybe think that interpretation might be wrong, that vision of Jesus isn't the correct one. We are so quick to say that this doesn't fit what we think of God is. And in doing so, we are almost trying to make God in our image rather than try to remember that we are made in his. Jesus didn't enter Jerusalem to be the conquering hero over the empire. He entered Jerusalem on a donkey to be a humble servant, willing to die for the crowds and their misguided expectations. He may not have toppled the oppressors of his day with the sword, but in dying and rising again, he conquered the greatest oppressor of those people and of people in every time and every place that we could ever have, that oppressor that is sin and the power that it holds over death and has destroyed it and defeated it and beaten it forever. For you and for me, with all of our expectations and our dreams, with all of our faults and with all of our failings, Jesus, knowing that this was all coming, still rides into Jerusalem with love and compassion in his heart for those people. And Jesus still rides into our lives and into our hearts and shows up for us here today. Sometimes in ways that make us uncomfortable, sometimes in places and people that make us nervous. Sometimes Jesus shows up and asks us to be and to do things that don't meet our expectations. And our first instinct may be to say, that can't be right. It's got to be wrong. We got to be understanding this wrong. We may even be called, like we feel like we're supposed to reject this Jesus that we encounter in our lives and in our scriptures, but he still shows up in love and grace for you and for me. Humble, willing to take on all our sin, especially those sins of expectations. In our brokenness and in our mistakes, Jesus comes to us and says, I love you, and I am here to be here for you, to save you from all of those mistakes. What a wonderful gift this Jesus coming into our lives is. And so I want to offer my blessings and God's blessings to all of you as we enter into this most holy of holy weeks, as we prepare to approach this cross and celebrate this empty grave that we are going to be experiencing in just a short week, because it is truly the most incredible gift for you, for me, for people everywhere, in all times and all places. So blessings to you this holy week. Amen.